everyone, my name is Darьya Щегельская, and today I want to present you my research paper, Detective Fiction Through the Years. My work includes following: introduction, 2 chapters, conclusion, and bibliography. The aim of my work is to compare classic and modern detectives and see how the genre has changed through the years. The detective genre is the oldest and most popular in literature. It has been around for over 150 years and has changed a lot over that time. We witness the growing interest in detective stories and series on TV contribute to it. The detective story, as a subgenre of the crime fiction, focuses on crime, usually murder, and the subsequent investigation of that crime. The detective, either professional or amateur, uses logic, deduction, and observation to solve the mystery. This genre often includes a close circle of suspects, each with their own possible motive for committing the crime. During my work, 5 types of detective fiction have been identified: classical detectives, historical detectives, thrillers, police detectives, and mysterious detectives. Each of them has different peculiarities and specific of the plot. Let's take thriller. As its name suggests, they tend to be action-packed, page-turners, with moments full of tension, anxiety, and fear. The typical examples of this genre are The Silent Patient by Alex Michaelides and It by Stephen King. In the late 19th and early 20th century, detective stories became very popular in books and magazines. The first true detective story was The Murders in the Rue Morgue by Edgar Allan Poe, published in 1841, which is considered to be the first book of the detective genre and makes Poe a creator of the detective genre. Another famous writer is Agatha Christie. She wrote such books as The Murders in the Orient Express and Death in the Nile. The main character of her book, Hercule Poirot, is a private detective. And Sherlock Holmes, created by Arthur Conan Doyle, is perhaps the most famous of these amateur detectives. Holmes is a master of observation and is capable of solving the most difficult crimes. Since then, the detective genre has continued to evolve and grow. And in recent years, many subgenres of the crime fiction have emerged, such as legal thrillers, police procedurals, and psychological thrillers. New century has required the creation of the new subgenres that deal with the issues and topics of today's society. This subgenre mainly revolves around the topics like racial and gender discrimination, bullying, financial and legal frauds, and psychological manipulations like abuse and gaslighting. So let's talk about the differences a little bit. In modern detectives, anyone can become a detective, no matter who they are. However, in the classical detectives, detectives are usually only people in the profession. For instance, in the book The Woman in the Window by A.J. Finn, an average woman who saw the crime starts investigating it. Or a teenage girl from A Good Girl's Guide to Murder investigates a kidnap case. The writing style has also noticeably changed compared to classic detectives. The language is simpler, the descriptions are shorter, and there are far fewer details, as if not to confuse the reader. The detective genre has been popular for many years, but since then the detective genre has dramatically changed, as it has evolved into numerous detective subgenres. Comparing classical detectives and modern detectives, I came up to the conclusion that now new types of detective stories have emerged in the new century, which deal with issues that are relevant to today's society. These stories focus on crime related to racism, sexism, bullying, fraud, manipulation, and abuse. In modern detective stories, anyone can become a detective, regardless of their profession or background. However, in the past, detectives were usually respected professionals who made a life by investigating crimes. Nowadays there are more female authors than male authors in this genre, whereas in the past most detective story authors were men. Modern detective stories are fast-paced and don't pay as much attention to the details. The characters in these stories are often not very likable. On the other hand, classic detective stories are slower and pay much more attention to the details. The characters in these stories are more likable to readers. These are the sources that I used during my work, and that's all. Thank you for your attention.
You mentioned that there are more female detective authors nowadays. Why is that so?
Made a list of the 50 most popular authors of the past and nowadays, and I compiled a list, so based on the books sold, and I found out that in the past there are more men writers, more men detective writers than female, and it's completely different nowadays. So I compiled a list, it's in my research paper.
Yeah.
Hello, you mentioned term gaslighting in your presentation. Can you please tell us a little bit more about that word? Where does it come from? What does it mean? And how is it used in modern or classical detectives?
I don't know where did it come from, but it's some kind of a bullying. It's some kind of a bullying, I think.
Okay, then my next question is when do you draw a line over classical detectives versus modern detectives?
Well,
when does modernity start?
Well, as I mentioned, in modern detectives, people are interested to read about relevant topics to today's society, and I think it started maybe because classical detectives, they are, I think, for older audience than modern detectives, so I don't know where or when did it start, but yeah, so I think that I don't know where is the line between classical detectives and modern detectives, but people now are interested to read about topics that are relevant to us, to today's society.
Okay, so term gaslighting actually comes from a play from 1938 that had 2 adaptations in Great Britain and the United States in the subsequent years, couple of years. So
nowadays it's TikTok era, and I know, have you met any instances of detectives in TikToks? It takes a minute to develop a plot, or perhaps a series of short videos which tell and may not, and the viewer may not get distracted with extra details and so on.
The most of the detectives that I've read, I saw them on TikTok, so I think yes, it's quite possible.
So, and you have actually mentioned that there are 5 different types of detective fiction.
Yeah.
Could you please just say which type this particular book actually is? I mean, which type of detective fiction this particular book really is?
I can tell you some examples. Yes.
Okay.
I don't know, for example, Death on the Nile. It's a typical classical detective, or The Murders in the Rue Morgue, as I mentioned, by Edgar Allan Poe. Historical is probably Da Vinci's Code. So I haven't read it, but I really want to. Thriller, as I mentioned, The Silent Patient by Alex Mike Light, and It by Stephen King. Police detectives, I think it's probably A Killer's Mind by Mike Omer. So the main character that the detective there is, she's a FBI agent, so it's kind of connected with police and something like this. And mysterious, I would say that this is The Mysterious Affair in Styles, also by Agatha Christie, but it includes some kind of mysterious things, and yeah.
I see, thank you. Have you read all these books in the original?
No, not in the original, in Russian, unfortunately. But I really want to reread this trilogy in English, because I have the last book in the series. I really want to buy the first 2 and read them in English.
I see, thank you, David.
which type, or maybe which types are the most popular among teenagers and why?
Well, I think thrillers, because they are action-packed, so with moments full of tension, anxiety, and fear, as I mentioned in my speech, and probably psychological thrillers, because a lot of teenagers, I think, are interested in psychology, and yeah, I think thrillers, maybe only thrillers, yeah. And maybe some teenagers are interested in classical detectives, because I'm so interested in classical detectives and I love reading classical detectives.
Dasha, thank you so much for your